by special request of Bill Landis, it is Target Tuesday, breaking down the wide receivers on the podcast table. He thought we were going to do it on the first day back on Monday. So he's got all the research ready to go. No surprise on the podcast table. He's Bill. I'm Austin Ward. And the wide receivers probably still going to be good.
Yeah,
is that what you wrote in the state of the position?
I don't remember. I don't have any research. I just wanted to do the receivers so we could say they're good. See you later.
Oh, that would have been easy.
Have like an 18-second episode of the show.
That would have been a much better. Then we both could have had to ease back in from vacation.
Yeah, that would have been nice. But like they are interesting though, because like they're going to be good. But this is probably the most unknown they've been in a while, right? Like take Egbuka out of the equation. And I think everybody loves Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, right, for obvious reasons, and they should. But it's not like Carnell played 700 snaps last year. He played like 250, I think it was, which is noteworthy in the world in this world where Ohio State's so good a receiver to play that much as a true freshman. Like we got to see it still with JJ. I think we'll see it very early. Like stop saying that, but for the time being, I guess we have to see it. And then there's the questions of like, how deep's the rotation going to go? And if it is deeper than a 3 or 4 man rotation, then who are the guys who kind of rise up to that level to get playing time? So it's not a group that I have like any real concerns about, but I do have questions about it. I think that makes them interesting going into the season.
It does make the return of Egbuka even more important. I think in real time, December and January, we're talking about this could be a real thing. Probably will happen for Ohio State. The pieces are in place. He's got something to prove. Draft stock wise, legacy wise, all those things, but like then it just sort of like vanished from conversation almost until the end of spring and the spring game with the one-handed catch and all that other stuff. Like he didn't have a lot to prove. He's coming off of the injury and the ankle situation, so it's like, well, we're not talking about him. And then you just see Jeremiah Smith making these plays, and the buzz starts again for Carnell Tate. It's like I'm glad. I think in some ways that Egbuka made that play to remind everyone how important he was going to be. Yeah.
Reminded me. Yeah. for sure. Because I'm definitely guilty of not talking about him enough.
Because I think it would be fine to live in a world where you look at Jeremiah Smith with the pure athleticism and the measurables, and you think, well, you line him up next to Egbuka, one of them may well have a higher NFL ceiling if we're going to way jump down the road. But in terms of like Ohio State offense, national championship push, positional versatility at wide receiver, both slot, outside, doing some of the stuff in the running game. Yep. Like Egbuka is really, I think, the key cog here for Ohio State. Maybe more than Quinshon Judkins, more than Travion Henderson, more than anybody else. I just feel like this offense needs a healthy version of Egbuka to do what it wants to do.
I think it's definitely on the table that the offense is sort of built around him, right? I wouldn't say that like that would definitely happen, but if you had to pick a guy, I think I would pick him because of what you just laid out, the versatility of skill set. And you guys were talking about guys who could win awards on the Rooster Show on Monday, and I know Egbuka's name was mentioned as a Blitnikoff. There is an award for versatility. It's the Paul Hornung Award. Mm-hmm. I could see Egbuka winning that. Like if he's obviously going to do a lot as a receiver, if he's going to carry the ball, still be involved in the return game in some capacity. We'll see whether or not Ohio State decides to shake that up. But I'd imagine he'll get a chance to return some punts, or maybe not kickoffs, but punts this year. Like he's going to do a lot for this team, and he should, because he has the ability to, one, shoulder that load. He has the experience, like nothing's going to face him, and he's an incredibly skilled player. Like it's worth reminding people, I think, as much as we can, that, and I know, I think maybe it was Tyvis that did that on Monday, like he and Marvin were practically identical in their production 2 years ago, and unfortunately for Egbuka, he just had those injuries that didn't allow him to kind of realize his potential last year. But like,
or even late 2 years ago.
Late 2 years, yeah, right. And I never during, at no point during Egbuka's career have I thought to myself like, oh well, he's produced what he's produced because of the guys around him. It was like, no, he's produced what he's produced because he's really freaking good. And he'll have more attention this year, I think. I do, unless Jeremiah Smith just goes absolutely bonkers, which is definitely on the table. Like I do think that Egbuka is probably the guy that's going to be at the top of the scouting report when teams are trying to figure out how to stop Ohio State because of all the different things he could do. And they'll have to contend with that. That's probably a bit of a different existence. But I also think that like all of the ways that we were incredibly excited about like an offense, what an offense built around Jackson Smith and Jigba might have looked like going into the 2022 season, I think that's possible for Egbuka this year, right? Maybe they're not quite the same player. Egbuka is probably like a bigger, more sturdier guy than Jackson was, but I think there's some similarity in what they're able to do is just as football players and how you're able to move them around within the scheme. So I will not be surprised one bit if Ohio State goes into 2024 thinking like, yeah, we're going to kind of build this thing around Egbuka.
Yeah, I think what they really wanted to do with Jackson, which was moving him around the field, but it didn't seem to me like it was going to be like, well, just give him a pop pass or a jet sweep and get it in his hands as soon as possible.
Yeah.
That felt like it was more matchup based. Like, can you get Jackson on a linebacker? Can you force an opponent not to shift their coverage and double him all the time?
Yep.
Like doing that, this is like the evolutionary version of that. Like if you can put Egbuka in the backfield and run a route or use him on the pop pass, jet sweep stuff, that seems pretty scary.
The thing, like, I was infatuated with the idea of putting Jackson Smith and Jigba in the backfield at times going into that season, but never did I think, like, oh, they might handle the ball. They might hand Egbuka the ball if they put him back there too, right? Especially in a world where Ohio State only has 4 scholarship running backs. So we have not talked about him nearly enough. I think it's understandable probably why we haven't. But if, like, October, we're like, is Egbuka Ohio State's best Heisman Trophy candidate because of all the things he does for the offense? Like I'm not. I don't. Maybe I wouldn't take it that far, but I do think like with Chip Kelly and his creative mind and Egbuka's ability to do a lot on the football field that he is on the precipice of I think a monster season.
So we did 30 minutes on Jeremiah Smith in the middle of June. I don't know that we have to have that entire conversation over again. If you've never watched the podcast daily. I would just urge you to scroll down a little bit and go watch that one. However, if you're on YouTube or on any of the audio platforms, we have a pretty detailed breakdown of what we think is coming there if you missed it. And if you heard that one before, you don't need to hear it again. So I'm a little bit more intrigued by what year 2 for Carnell Tate looks like at this point because we've already talked so much about Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, no, I am too. And I it's interesting to me that I think everyone in the room has the ability to move around some. And I would include Carnell Tate in that, but I don't know that I have a great feel for what it looks like. Aside from him playing on the outside, but I do think they'll try to move him around too. I don't know if he's a guy they might try to get involved with some sweeps and stuff as well. But I just like kind of fall back on the idea of it is incredibly hard to get on the field as a true freshman at this position at this school, and he did it. Mm-hmm. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't do it, Egbuka didn't do it. And Carnell did. And I know there was some injury stuff that played a hand in him probably playing more than perhaps was the plan for the season, but it wasn't like he was, non-existent for the first half of the year and then started playing after Egbuka got hurt. Like Carnell was on the field very early on and they trusted him to do that. So I think I would like to see him become a little bit more of like a blocking threat in this offense with what I think that's probably true for everybody with the way that Chip Kelly wants to run the ball. It's like an all hands on deck approach. And I know Ohio State historically has kind of been that, but I think it's maybe been a little less emphasized under Ryan Day and Brian Hartline because they've just been so good at pass catchers than it was like compared to the Urban Meyer era. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see kind of everybody take a step forward there. But I look at like Carnell's frame. I think to myself, like, man, that guy could be like really dangerous on the outside as a blocker with some of the stuff that Chip wants to do.
Yeah, the number of snaps and the responsibility they put on Carnell Tate a year ago is interesting, not just because like he was able to do it. The production, you would have thought there'd be more of it, but I attribute like, both the snaps and the production, I think, could have been higher than what they were if not for the foot injury, which Ohio State didn't talk publicly about all that much. And I asked Carnell about it during spring ball. I was like, Brian Hartline brought it up right before the Cotton Bowl, but never gave any details. I'm like, what exactly was going on? It's like, well, you can play through this sort of foot, plantar fasciitis, I think, situation that he had. That's my understanding of what he was dealing with. But, like, you're certainly not going to be the best version of yourself.
That hurts. Like that, I've actually had that, and like I didn't try to play football on it, so I can't imagine trying to do that. No, that's like I don't know. There's every offseason, it's like this guy was good, but he could have been better, but he was hurt and nobody knew about it, right? I feel like that. Unfortunately, is the way of things with a lot of Ohio State players. Not to open that box back up for you.
We don't have to do that.
And again, that's also it's probably worth keeping in mind that he wasn't what we saw of Carnell, which I thought was pretty good. Was not an 100% version of Carnell for much of last year.
We were hoping to see a 100% version of Brandon Inniss in spring, and we did not. So I think that's another check another box on the intrigue list here for Ohio State with a guy that I think everyone is really excited to see in action. Just got the smallest sort of taste as a true freshman, wasn't able to enroll early. He's the number 1 wide receiver in the country a year ago. So there's a lot of flashing signs that this guy can be. And when you bring up the versatility and guys that you could also hand it to, Brandon Inniss falls in that category as well.
Yeah, a very, very similar skill set, I think, to Egbuka, which is good. It's nice to, like, if you're going to have a guy like Egbuka who you could theoretically build a lot around, and then you have like a backup to him that you can kind of just throw out there and keep doing all the same stuff. Like it's a nice luxury for Ohio State to have, because I don't know, like Ohio State didn't have another Curtis Samuel, right, in 2016.
Did anybody?
Yeah, nobody did. Like, and now it seems like they have a couple of guys on this roster who can do a lot for you. And like, Brandon might be the guy that I'm like most curious about going into fall camp. We didn't get an update. I think Ryan Day said like everyone who was out or missed some time in the spring is like expected back. We didn't specifically ask about Brandon Inniss, which we probably should have, because that whatever procedure he had happened obviously late in the proceedings of spring ball. So you would think that timeline might extend toward camp. So I'm hopeful that he is able to get on the field for day one of camp, because I do think if everyone is sort of in agreement, which I think they are, that the top 3 receivers are going to be Emeka Egbuka, Tate, and Jeremiah Smith, I would think that as long as he's healthy, Brandon Inniss is 4th. But if he's not healthy, then that opens the door for a couple other guys.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen beyond that?
I think Bryson Rogers will play. I thought that there was enough of a spark there in the spring, combined with like they let him come back, right? They didn't have to do that.
No.
So clearly they see something in him that's worthwhile to bring that back on the roster after going through a situation where he was going to transfer and then ultimately changed his mind. So I take that as an endorsement of his skill set and his ceiling. And I thought that he did pop a few times in the spring when we got to watch. So I would be surprised if he doesn't play. So I think like I don't know. I think Emeka's going to play a ton because he should, and it might work out that Jeremiah and Carnell just like, no, like sure, we're going to rotate, and then like 3 games into the season, like, no, those guys are going to play all the snaps. So I don't know that I have a great feel for what that's going to look like. I am right now thinking that we will see a little bit more of a rotation than we have seen in the last few years, only because the room does feel maybe 4 or 5 deep. We'll have to like. Even like Mylan Graham's in my mind when I say that. We haven't seen him yet. He like just got here a month ago. So I just think they might have maybe more guys that they trust to play than they've had the last couple of years.
Well, because of the situation that they're in, I guess that this could be a little bit of a catch-22. If you have 3 weeks, let's say, to warm up, a sort of preseason schedule, you could rotate. You could play everybody. You could see a taste for Mylan Graham as you get him up to speed. You could see Jaden Ballard out there pushing for reps. Bryson Rogers, whatever you want to do. But the flip side is like you still haven't seen a ton of those. Will be the first games for Jeremiah Smith. Those will be, the first extended action for Carnell Tate. Like those guys actually need reps too. And I think that's the hard balancing act that Brian Hartline is going to have here. It's a good problem to have. Everyone knows that they're talented. But do you want to play 6 guys or have 3 or 4 elite guys against Oregon, which is about where they've been? Like, And how do you find the right balance to get those guys where they need to be? Mainly that's Jeremiah Smith. And he might just be Ryan Day said during the spring game, well, he doesn't need the work. Like that's a crazy thing to say about a true freshman at the end of spring. And maybe that's the way that they're approach it, that he's that good that they can rotate 6 or 7 guys throughout September. I don't know the answer. I'll defer to their judgment on that, but I don't really know how that's going to look.
I want to go back to January and then until now, just like make a catalog of all the crazy things people have already said about Jeremiah Smith, to then like compare it to what they'll say about him in the fall when the game starts. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't really know what it's going to look like either. The one thing that does make me fairly confident that they'll play more guys is like Chip Kelly's his desire, I think, to want to change it up a little bit schematically week to week. Not maybe schematically is the wrong word, but like he will have like game specific personnel packages, and I think within that you might see more of a willingness to play like 4 and 5 receiver packages, which we frankly haven't seen a whole lot under Ryan Day. Usually it's if they go 5 wide, it's 3 receivers, a running back, and a tight end. They'll kind of all spread out if they're an empty. I think that Chip Kelly might decide like, you know what, I think we can really attack Iowa if we put 4 receivers on the field. So then that those are snaps that haven't always existed in this offense. So I think that will provide more opportunity as well. But when you're sort of in like your quote unquote base offense, how much room will there be for multiple guys, or how much room will there be for more than 3 to play regularly? I don't know. I think it could very well end up that maybe it's not a ton because the top 3 are so good.
Usually in these state of the position groups, you're like, well, you factor in the recruiting. It's just like Brian Hartline's going to put together a very good class every year.
Yeah.
I do think there has been a little bit of a shift there in the philosophy, which is with an eye on NIL and revenue sharing and the difficulty of maybe doing that at wide receiver more than almost any other position.
Yeah, maybe you're not as hyper aggressive in trying to bring in like the best 4 receivers in the country in every recruiting class. You build in a little. I know they offered the Preston Bowman kid from Pickerington in the 2025 class. Like, Jaden Ballard is the last in-state receiver to sign with Ohio State, right, in the 2021 class, and it seems like they are a little more interested in finding some closer to home talent, which I have no issue with, because I rather like the balance of like going and taking. Not even swings for Brian Hartline. They're like practice cuts to go get to go get the best receivers in the country. But if you compare,
just grooving fastballs, for
just taking BP.
Watch
fastballs,
this.
Yeah. If you can like find some balance of like we're going to go to Florida or California or wherever to get the top, like our top 2 guys in the class are going to be top 5 in a position of the country or top 10 in the position of the country, and then we're going to have a more maybe local flavor with the recruiting. I don't hate that approach. So we'll see how it shakes out. I guess so they have 2 commitments right now in 2025, and then they have the next freak in Chris Henry Jr. in 2026. So they're fine. I think maybe they're finding it a little more difficult to like navigate the new NIL world in terms of like it just being like an automatic that the best receivers are going to go to Ohio State. But I don't have any concerns about what Brian Hartline's going to be able to land.
Yeah, and I think that they have to know in the back of their mind, and I'm not going to speak for them, but I know that behind the scenes, you have to start factoring in what that looks like for your roster to keep your own guys. Mm-hmm. And if Jeremiah Smith is what we think that he's going to be and what everybody is saying and what they've seen, then
it's going to cost you.
It's going to cost you every single year.
Yeah.
Like part of the Emeka Egbuka did want to come back to secure his legacy and to improve his draft stock. That is true, but he was still going to be a 2nd-round draft pick at worst. So he didn't come back for free.
Right.
I don't know what the amount is. I don't know what that's going to take. But if Jeremiah Smith is the number 1 wide receiver he's already the number 1 recruit, best one ever. If he goes out and validates that as a true freshman, then he's got 2 contract years ahead of him because there's not collective bargaining out there. And you would have to factor that in. And I'm not saying that Jeremiah Smith already, I think, turned down more money from other places. I think that we can accept that as a basic starting point. So I'm not even bringing that up from a perspective of he's going to do that and then he's just trying to catapult somewhere else or looking for a better deal. He's already shown that he may have a better understanding of what is valuable for his development and competition and all those other things. But you still don't just turn down 7-figure checks for no reason. And
right. You have to remain competitive.
So Ohio State has to, I think, factor that in, and that's the new balancing act. If you recruit at a very high level, and year after year after year, with whether that's Brandon Inniss and Emeka Egbuka and on down the right, one after the other, Jackson Smith and Jigba, one after the other, Garrett Wilson, you're getting number 1 guy. You can't just do 1, 2, 3, and 4 anymore.
Yeah.
Because the bill is going to be exorbitant.
It is going to be. It is, and I will say right now that I don't. If they can't sign the number 1 receiver in the country like over the next 3 cycles because they got to pay Jeremiah Smith, like it's worth it. I won't be upset about that. Like that, I think you and I are in agreement that like we've always kind of thought that every team has a budget, and it seems like Ohio State has expanded, and I think we'll continue to expand. Keeping your best players that are already on your roster, I think, supersedes going out there and trying to overpay for a kid who's still in high school. And that's especially true with a talent like Jeremiah Smith. So, but if that changes the landscape a little bit for how they have to go about receiver recruiting, it's not that like they're suddenly going to go and like only load up on like 3-star prospects. That's not what we're saying. But
right.
Maybe they just don't, like you said, add 4 top 5 guys at the position. In the cycle.
I mean, and if that's the adjustment they make, because at wide receiver specifically, Brian Hartline does not seem all that interested in transfer portal guys, and he's been able to build this in a sustainable way and line him up with people who are buying into what he's selling and the culture and the brotherhood and passing it down while also still making some good money. Like, be foolish and naive to think that Marvin Harrison wasn't making money last year, that Emeka's not now. Like, that's the way it works. But, I think that's also why maybe you don't see, even once you get into the season, the 6-man rotation stuff anymore. Like, because you might have had to stop recruiting nothing but 5 stars. Like that. Sorry, like those days may be over.
Yeah. Well, maybe moving forward.
Maybe maybe I'll be wrong about that.
But Emeka's a 5-star, Jeremiah's a 5-star, Carnell's a 5-star, Mylan Graham's a 5-star.
Okay, still good.
They're still pretty good. Yeah.
All right, that's the end of a Target Tuesday. Summing it up again.
Oh, Brandon Inniss is a 5-star. Sorry.
Yeah, so I skipped him. I apologize for leaving out another number 1 overall recruit, but that's the way it goes. So on down the line, another one where we just wrap up talking about the wide receivers and say they're very good.
They are very good.
That's the state of the position.
That's right. State of the position.
Maybe there'll be some that are more. We did talk about offense. There's a good balance. There's back and forth.
Yeah, that's good.
By the time we get to tight ends and wrap up the offense, maybe there'll be more intrigue coming on the next episode of the Podcast Daily. We hope you join us for that one. We thank you for joining us for this one. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.